This episode of Black Civics Podcast is sponsored by BUTs. Order Holla at a Scholar t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and totes from BUTs online at bit.ly/BEYOUTEES. Holla at a Scholar for distinguished academics and critical thinkers that have not forgotten whence they came. Holla and visit BUTs and shop today.
Black Civics is an educational program dedicated to supporting the ADOS community through podcasts, videos, and courses that will elevate our civic awareness. Together, we discuss politics and government, public policy, political activism, and much more, all in a way that's easy to understand and helps you learn. Black Civics is brought to you by Kimberly Renee Davis, Tony Blount, and Chris Lodgson.
Welcome to another episode of Black Civics, where we bring you political education geared to the ADOS community. I am Kimberly Renee Davis, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Tony Blount and Christopher Lodgson. On today's episode, we're going to talk about voting down ballot. Fellas, it's good to see you again.
Hey, Kim, how's it going?
Hey.
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here for the third episode of Black Civics. We're going to be talking about a very important and misunderstood topic today, voting down ballot and what it means, and more specifically, what the strategy looks like in action for ADOS as we head into the 2020 election season.
Yes, Kim, there has been a lot of talk coming out of the hashtag ADOS conference, which just happened this October, about the strategy of voting down ballot, in particular, voting Democratic down ballot. What that means, what that strategy looks like in practice for ADOS in these upcoming 2020 elections.
Absolutely. Now, Chris, can you explain exactly what down ballot means?
Yes, Kim, I can. So let's start with down ballot, right? So the term down ballot or down ticket refers to local candidates and ballot measures that fall below the national races on the ballot. Down ballot or down ticket candidates are your state senators, they're your county commissioners, they're your city council members, your attorneys generals, your local prosecutors, chiefs of police, mayors, school board members, and more. Down ballot measures include local propositions and referendums on issues ranging from, what the minimum wage is in your state to how much your landlord can or cannot raise your rent, so whether or not you pay sales taxes on your groceries, and much, much more. Voting down ballot as a political strategy means abstaining from voting in or for national races like president and or writing in your preferred candidate or preferred choice if your state allows it, and instead voting in the local races or measures that we just mentioned. Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore, co-founders of the hashtag ADOS movement, the new political movement that's demanding from politicians and government at all levels reparations and a Black agenda, are encouraging American descendants of slavery to vote down ballot as a political tactic in the 2020 primary election cycle, the goal of which would be to force the Democratic Party to meet the demand for reparations and for a Black agenda. They argue that because no Democratic primary presidential candidate has so far supported reparations or produced a targeted, specific Black agenda, that they don't deserve the Black or ADOS vote.
Wow, that's very interesting. We'll come back to that last part, but it sounds like there are a lot of races and issues to deal with outside of just the national races for president, Congress, or the Senate. But go deeper. What makes these local races and local measures so important?
Good question, Kim. National elections, especially during a presidential election year, almost always draw the most attention. What many people don't realize, however, is that most of the policy that affects them and their family directly happens on a local level. Local taxes, ballot measures, state laws, all of these things fall down ballot.
Right. And all politics are local, as they say. Think about it. How much money your kid's school gets for books or for after school programs, or under which conditions your kid can or cannot be expelled or suspended from school, is usually determined by your local government, whether it's your city, your state, or your county. Now, sure, the federal government does its part to help out under what we call federalism, which is a system of government where power is shared and divided between the national and state governments. But the education decisions that matter to you and yours are made much, much closer to home. And the same is true for almost every other kitchen table issue that you care about. Under what conditions can you be or could you be evicted? That's local. Whether or not you can grow or sell cannabis legally, that's local. How much you pay for in transportation, in utilities, how often the trash gets collected, that's local. The list goes on, and there are just too many examples to cite. Now, can local issues and local elections have national impact? Sure, they can, and they do. There are actually quite a few examples of instances where local issues and local races had national impact. Gavin Newsom, now governor of California, is famous for allowing the city of Sacramento to sign off on same-sex marriage licenses when he was mayor back in 2004. That episode is credited with having a big impact on same-sex marriages in cities and states across the nation and nationwide. Another example going on right now is with cannabis. States all over the country are moving locally on legalization, and altogether, it's having an effect on the federal level, such that Congress itself is being forced to act to catch up with states and local governments.
Wow, that's a lot of national influence. And this can work in reverse, right? Can national laws have local influence, Chris? Or Tony? Sorry.
Well, great point, Kim. Yes, the famous Brown versus Board of Education is a perfect example of that. The Supreme Court case invalidated the laws that allowed legal segregation in public schools. But simply saying school segregation is over versus actually forcing school districts to make the necessary changes are two entirely different things. And guess who it fell on to implement those changes?
State governments, local governments, including mayors, school boards, local judges, and attorney general and police chiefs, right?
Exactly, all of who are elected down ballot. Unfortunately, many local governments dragged their feet and even outright opposed ending school segregation.
Okay, so now that we have a good grasp on what voting down ballot means and how it affects policy, why is this such an important strategy for ADOS? More specifically, why have Yvette Carnell and attorney Antonio Moore urge ADOS voters to vote not just down ballot, but Democratic down ballot?
Good question, Kim. Let's define what voting Democratic or Democrat down ballot means. Remember, voting down ballot as a political tactic means leaving the national races or top of the ticket empty or writing in your preferred candidates when national politicians don't meet your demands. No agenda for us, no votes for you is the slogan, right? Voting Democratic down ballot simply means that when you look for local candidates to support, you look for Democrats to support first. Of course, if the Democrats don't have an agenda for you, they also don't get your support. Same rules apply. No agenda for us, no votes for you. Let's keep in mind that we, and by we, I mean ADOS, American descendants of slavery, make up on average about 20%, 1 in 4 of the Democratic Party's voters in primary elections. Also, since about 1980, over 80% of Black ADOS voters have voted Democrat. No Democratic nominee for president has won the nomination for president without a majority of the Black ADOS vote. When you really begin to put these pieces together, you realize that the success of the Democratic Party is held up by the Black vote.
Yes, but the problem, as Yvette and Moore have put it, is that ADOS voters are not getting an even exchange for their vote. Black voters are keeping Democrats in office, but national candidates are refusing to run with an explicit Black agenda. We can change that, though, by leveraging the collective power of our voting bloc to force their hand.
Got it. But before we go any further, can you explain exactly what a voting bloc is?
Sure, Kim. A voting bloc is essentially a group of voters who are motivated by common concerns or interests. Their shared issues are important enough that they generally vote the same way based on those issues being addressed by candidates.
So wouldn't it make sense for the entire ADOS voting bloc to just stay home so that the Democratic Party loses and then respects our collective power?
Great question again, Kim. While that sounds like a good strategy and tactic, staying home undermines our power as a voting bloc, actually. We spoke earlier about how local politics, the down ballot candidates, and ballot measures are the true drivers of that national change, right? If we simply stay home, we lose out on the ability to elect those local candidates who do have a real agenda for ADOS. And locally, it's a lot easier for us, each of us, to either influence those candidates to run on our issues or to actually be those candidates ourselves.
Exactly. And what this also achieves is a much more direct message to the country and to the Democratic Party specifically. Instead of simply disengaging, we are showing up at the polls and letting them know that we are demanding an exchange for our continued votes over the years. As Yvette has stated, start at the top of your ballot and decide if each candidate has a viable agenda for ADOS. If they don't, write in ADOS and move down to the next line. Keep going that way until you reach the end.
But if I can't find a Democratic candidate with a Black agenda, wouldn't one just go and look on the Republican side and hold them to the same standard?
Well, there's a quick answer. Because Republicans don't need the Black vote to win. So the answer is no. You have to have leverage in any exchange, and there is no leverage for Black voters within the modern National Republican Party. The modern National Republican Party has won countless times while running directly against the interests of Black voters. White voters still lean heavily Republican more than Democrat. And the values of the Republican Party, at least as they tell it, are based on small government, on reducing government programs, and reducing government spending. We, ADOS, are making a reparations justice claim to the tune of trillions of dollars, multiple trillions of dollars over multiple generations. A party still trying to slash government programming is not going to support a multi-trillion-dollar program of reparations for ADOS.
Yes, and that doesn't mean that there aren't individual Republican candidates locally that won't in some way embrace a Black agenda. But you have to ask yourself a couple of things. How can a voting bloc work effectively if we don't vote with the same strategies? And even if a Republican candidate supports a Black agenda, what decision will they make if they come to an impasse on the will of their party versus the justice claim of ADOS? As a voting bloc willing to influence the most change immediately, we have to focus on one party. This does not mean that we identify as Democrats or Republicans. This simply means that we are making a strategy play as a group to leverage the most power.
So now what happens if my state doesn't allow me to write in ADOS?
Short answer, you leave it blank. In fact, there are about 8 states where you can't write anything in other than the candidates on the ballot. And in those cases, and if that's one of your states, then you leave it blank. Those states are Louisiana, Arkansas, New Mexico, South Carolina, Hawaii, Nevada, South Dakota, and Oklahoma. There are also a bunch of states in which there are requirements for candidates and requirements that candidates need to fulfill before they can become an official write-in. For more information, definitely consult with your local Secretary of State or voter registrar's office, and visit Black Civics on Facebook, Instagram, and blackcivics.com.
Black Civics is an educational program dedicated to supporting the ADOS community through podcasts, videos, and courses that will elevate our civic awareness. Together, we discuss politics and government, public policy, political activism, and much more, all in a way that's easy to understand and helps you learn. Black Civics is brought to you by Kimberly Renee Davis, Tony Blunt, and Chris Lodgson.